We're holding this reparations rebellion, in fact we call it the Pan-Afrikan Reparations Rebellion Groundings, because we are in rebellion. Non-violent direct action. Even to be here today is an act of rebellion, because there is heavy policing and there is an attempt to deny us our freedom of speech and to be able to congregate as African heritage communities and our allies to discuss issues of reparatory justice, which for us are about life and death. This is not just about compensation, which is where most people jump to when they hear the word reparations. Reparations means to repair harm, and there's a lot of harm going on today, and our groundings are organised each year with a theme, and our theme this year is defeating the Maangamizi, which means the African Holocaust, of neo-colonialism with African autonomy. All roads must lead to our sacred cause of reparations. So what we're saying, we're calling our people out because we are in a state of emergency. Our children are dying. We have been misled. We have been hoodwinked. Our people have been sold a lie about our life here in Britain. And now when many of our foreparents have worked their butts off, they're being deported. So we're not even able to benefit from the legacy of our labour here. We're being dispossessed of our homeland. Our children have nowhere to go. They are herded into concrete jungles. Hence we're seeing an escalation of intra-community violence in terms of gun and knife crime. So what we're doing is we are here today honouring Emancipation Day, so-called, but we're also sending a key message to the British state and other European governments that we have not forgotten the injustices against our foreparents. It was the British Parliament on the 1st of August in 1833 with its so-called Abolition of Slavery Act that set in motion, I should say, the process of enslavers being compensated. And despite the fact that from the time we were kidnapped from the shores of Africa in the 1400s, every generation of our people have been trying to stop that harm and be about the repair. We have been prevented from doing so. And worse still, today we are denied access to our rightful inheritance, our resources that continue to be looted from Africa. And many of those still sit in the Houses of Parliament as their foreparents were involved with historical enslavement. And every year we do a peaceful protest. We have a Stop The Maangamizi Recharge Genocide Ecocide petition, which is calling for the establishment of the all-party Parliamentary Commission of Inquiry for Truth and Reparatory Justice. We believe there needs to be a mechanism that we can have dialogue with British state and society about the cause of repair and how it impacts on us. This is not just about the harm that has been done to African heritage communities. You will see here today we are supported by allies. Extinction Rebellion are one of our key allies, members of the Green Party, other political parties, and in fact we've had a whole set of motions passed across this country in terms of London councils and Bristol City Council supporting this demand, because we have to find a mature way to have dialogue that keeps our communities together and doesn't pull our communities apart. And despite the fact that we have been requesting this, they are denying our right to be heard, they are denying the rights of states in the Caribbean, states in Africa. So what are we supposed to do? We have no choice but to declare a rebellion. But rebellion is not about tearing down. What we're saying as to our people is that we have to be about the rebuilding. We have to be about repairing ourselves, because no one is going to do that. But at the same time, we do not want to be impeded by the British state, by local authorities. Incidentally, Lambeth Council passed a reparations, atonement and reparations motion in July of 2020. But yet here we are. Here we are being denied access to space, being threatened with being arrested if we actually occupy space on one day a year. We have been doing this peacefully since 2014. And last year we declared this rebellion because we need to build our own. We want access to our homeland, we want access to our citizenship, we want access to our resources, and we want to have a say in how those resources get used. We don't want to be told that there's no resources for us to do our repair work, especially when we know that 101 corporations listed on the London Stock Exchange control all our key mineral and energy resources. So this is genocide, and we are also here to stand up for our planet, because the harm that has been done to us, this rapacious system of extractivism and capitalism, is also imperiling all life on planet Earth. Yeah. So as the African Emancipation Day Reparations March Committee and the Stop The Maangamizi Campaign, our event is here in Brixton. We've decided to reclaim Brixton because Brixton is being gentrified, and it is a historical site of black struggle in the UK. There is a delegation from the Windrush Defenders Group who are participating today, who will be going to a march to, I believe, Buckingham Palace. But actually the event that we are organising today is in Brixton. We are expecting more of our people to come down. Our programme is very full. We're going to be facilitating people's assemblies, one with African heritage communities, but we also want to have dialogue with our allies in terms of people outside of our communities to look at how do we work together, how do we share strategies and tactics, because we know that our repair process is also catalysing and inspiring the repair processes of other peoples who've experienced colonisation and dispossession in terms of European settler colonialism. And we are uniting despite the attempts to keep us divided. So we are facilitating a programme where we can hear from our allies. We're going to have a People's Tribunal session where we are going to be the adjudicators, and we are putting Priti Patel and the UK government on trial for the crimes against us, the crimes of neo-colonialism, the crimes of genocide and the crimes of ecocide. We will hear from elected officials who are supporting the cause of the people. We have a campaign working with the local Afrikan Reparations Forum of London on the Afrikan Reparations vote. We are saying to all elected officials, you can no longer take our votes for granted. If you do not support our community cause, then we will not vote for you. We thank those elected officials who have answered that call and who have been working equitably with communities because they are representatives of the people. We will be hearing from many other organisations in our community who are doing repair work, who are not being heard. We have the solutions to this crisis. We, the people, have the solutions, and we want to be heard. So that's why we're doing this. We're also going to be hearing from many of our artists and edutainers who will give very creative inputs on the themes of the day. This is a day that is about unifying our communities, but also remembering our ancestors and sending a very strong message that we will never forget, and we will continue to articulate our right to repair, our right to a remedy and repair by way of reparations, holistic reparations, as is recognised by the United Nations framework and guidelines on a right to a remedy and reparations.
Osrodin asasia insudi yana nanum nsamanfo me frem mauga miyo togo ple mamo mele miajo meyo mi pete meyo mi pete ata na anyumo wonche boy mene hoba ni ma hoba na ma hoba so weto nkwara mo hwere mo nkwa 1976 me forever Winnie Mandela me fro Nani me fro Taki mincha boy Johnny Hansi mincha boy Ni lai minche boy. Yo, Delali Klu, Melawayo. Bami Ajuma, Melawayo. Meyo mi pete. Na me yo ni mele. Me na be me man from one na nyasi bi fi mu. Mo do to ntimi from nyina. Mo mekran ya ho ene. Nhyiemu ayaya ne hai. Ya nya no jojojo. Ne nya ntutu ya bia. Twa o manya aba. Thank you. Before I end, I'll play this for the ancestors.
Thank you for coming to this year's Pan-Afrikan Reparations Rebellion Groundings. Sorry. Okay. Our theme for this year is defeating the Maangamizi of neocolonialism with African autonomy. All roads must lead to our sacred cause for reparations. The words in this title may or may not be familiar to everyone, so I wanted to briefly introduce myself and Kofi here, who's helping me, and I'm helping him this afternoon. Before breaking down, so I want to break down some of those terms in the title, with a view to focusing our attention on the need for building international solidarity around the sacred cause for reparations. So my name's Nikki Frith, and I work at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, and I'm one of the co-founders of the International Network of Scholars and Activists for Afrikan Reparations, and we call ourselves INOSAR. And I co-founded that with Esther Stanford-Corsey, Kofi Mawuli-Klu, and Professor Omama Joyce Hope Scott of Boston University. And we were founded right here in 2017 in Brixton. So you can find us online if you search for INOSAR, INOSAAR. We're an independent and voluntary reparations consultancy and advocacy group that was born out of a mutually respectful engagement of scholars and activists in collaboration with communities of African reparations interest. We sought to harmonise some of the tensions that exist in the UK between scholars and activists and harmonise efforts on African reparations within various institutional and community spaces. After 4 years of being in operation, we define ourselves as a self-organising cross-community bridging agency. Our aim is to assist in the consolidation of a growing global African reparations movement, recognised by some as the international social movement for African reparations, by uniting activists and scholars on an international scale, while developing a strong youth-led base to ensure the movement's sustainability. So that's why I'm here. But I also wanted to briefly look at some of those important terms that can be found in the title of today's Groundings. I'll begin with the term Maangamizi. This is a key Swahili term referring to the Holocaust or the Holocaust of chattel colonial and neo-colonial forms of enslavement. It means to cause destruction and to utterly destroy. In this sense, it equates to a genocide or an ecocide and carries with it a sense of intentionality. It also carries with it a sense of continuation. Within the Stop The Maangamizi We Charge Genocide Ecocide campaign in its petition, which you can sign online, reparations are being sought not just for the past, but for the present-day continuum of harms linked to chattel, colonial and neo-colonial forms of enslavement, including harms against our planet. The calls to stop the Maangamizi, therefore, calls to name the causes, consequences, contemporary manifestations and solutions to the harm through a process of reparatory justice. To quote one of today's organisers, Esther Stanford-Kosei, we are calling for a shutting down of the Maangamizi's crime scene and the reparatory justice redistribution of wealth and all ill-gotten gains of the Maangamizi. The purpose of this redistribution is to enable African people, she says, to forge an alternative path of progression that is based on eradicating Afrophobia and other forms of racism, rebuilding our communities and nation formations in harmony with each other as members of the human family and also Mother Earth. So today is about working towards those goals and thinking about the roles here in Max Roach Park that allies can play in relation to those goals. Today is about building international solidarity around reparatory justice issues that are of relevance to all of us in our quest to address the harms of African enslavement and colonialism that continue to adversely shape our society today. There are clear links between African reparations as a sacred cause and a holistic process of repair and the need for planet repairs. We need to repair holistically. That is, by thinking about the whole of our being as part of the planet, our relationship with and inseparability from the earth, environment, and what we call the pluriverse. The pluriverse comes from a history of rebellion, and that's what we're doing here at this Pan-Afrikan Groundings today. It comes from the Zapatista Uprising in Mexico that responded to the devastation that was being wreaked upon indigenous communities linked to centuries of enslavement, exploitation and colonialism, and in protest against the North American Free Trade Agreement. Just as in Mexico and elsewhere in Abya Yala, the so-called Americas, these histories are not in the past. They continue to affect every aspect of life, hence the need for holistic, pluriversal, reparatory responses. The pluriverse stands as an alternative to the lie that we have been told about the superiority of Western civilization, or about the universal one-size-fits-all models of being and knowing that privilege the West and its capitalist models of exploitation. The pluriverse is a decolonial way of thinking because it challenges Western claims to superiority. We can respond by finding pluriversal approaches which correspond with the Zapatista's vision of a world in which many worlds exist, a world in which many worlds have an equal right to coexist. Today we are bringing together our multiple approaches, backgrounds, heritages, understandings, all valid, all important, all equal. So we're going to have drumming, and then we'll be hosting our People's Assembly on Internationalist Solidarity Allyship, and this is open to everyone. There's a parallel assembly on Afrikan Reparations Solutions in Windrush Square, and that's specifically for African heritage communities. And during these assemblies, we'll have the opportunity to share our understandings with a view to exploring the important interconnections between racial and environmental injustices and what we mean by internationalist solidarity and Pan-Afrikan liberation. So I want to thank you for listening and to welcome each and every one of you to today's Pan-Afrikan Groundings. Thank you.
Yeah, apologies, I'm really exhausted, so I really want you all to do the talking. This People's Assembly is for us to explore the perspectives we all bring to understanding and working to promote internationalist solidarity. It's important to try and grasp what the internationalist means. Internationalist, simply put, is relationships between nations. The kind of relationships that promote mutual respect. And it is the basis for us rediscovering our common humanity. Because we are born into specific families, in specific places, with ancestries that go to the roots of communities. And it is through these communities that we need to build relationships with each other. If we build relationships just at very personal level, there will always be something missing, because no human being is on its own, has come onto this planet on their own. You come from a mother, a father, and so many others that make up families make up communities, so you can't build individual relationships that do not touch on the relations you have with your parents and the communities and so on. So we have to bear this very much in mind. And this is where internationalism comes in. You don't see an individual without seeing, the family, without seeing the communities from which they come, and that whatever you do as an individual could affect not just how people view you, but how people also view, your family, your communities. So internationalism is extremely very important in the kind of relationships we need to build, particularly taking the history that, we have all experienced and our ancestors have experienced, which very much shape our present. The present is nothing but, history, as it manifests itself in the lives that we lead today. To deny that the present is shaped by history, whether you were there or not, is really to be whistling in the wind, So this opportunity really for me is for us to explore these things and bring our perspectives together, mindful of what reparations, particularly within the context of planet repairs, how do we stop the harm being done to ourselves and to the planet, and how do we heal ourselves and through that contribute to the healing of the planet? All of these have bearings on what, internationalist solidarity is supposed to mean. So I would want us to see how we progress with this discussion. We can either break up into small groups and then discuss and bring back what is the thinking in these groups.
Okay, so we have two questions that we'd like you to focus on. So this is called a People's Assembly, so it's different from a Citizens' Assembly. And if you want more information on a People's Assembly, there are some green books up here at the front. Please feel free to come and collect them. But just to kind of give you the three basic pillars, one is a radical inclusivity, so no voice should dominate, all voices should be heard. And that might mean considering people in your group and what they need. There's also active listening, so that means like focusing on hearing somebody all the way through before you start developing a response. So it's not about point scoring. It's about the wisdom of the crowds. And then it's trust. We need to trust the process and the participants and the intentions of the people in the room or in the park. Okay, so the aim of this People's Assembly is because we've called it because this is part of today's Pan-Afrikan Reparations grounding. And we're here to explore two key questions. Okay, so question one.
Bring it down a bit.
Oh, thank you. Okay, cheers. Thanks. Question one, what should Internationalist solidarity from allies mean to African reparationists and their supporters? So what does it bring to the movement, right? So what can allyship bring in terms of international solidarity? The second one, what does Pan-Afrikan Liberation, both on the continent, and when we say continent of Africa, and in the diaspora of Africa, mean to allies? So why be involved in a Pan-African liberation struggle? What does it bring to you? So both what do you bring to the movement and what does it bring to you? Is everyone clear? Cool. Okay, great.
Yeah, the idea is that many actually do some internationalist solidarity or solidarity work one way or the other. What do you think the internationalist solidarity work you do should mean to African reparationists? What you do, however you understand internationalist solidarity and what work you're doing, in that area, what do you think it should mean to Africans who are campaigning for reparations? That is the first question. Is that very clear? So it's about how you understand it and the things that you're doing. What do you think it should mean to African reparations? Yeah, and the second question is really about what is your understanding of Pan-Afrikan liberation? This is a Pan-Afrikan Reparations Rebellion Groundings, and it is centered on African people, both on the continent of Africa, our mother continent, and in the diaspora, which includes the UK and everywhere else African communities are. We're involved in a struggle for liberation, an intergenerational struggle for liberation. And reparations is very much at the heart of that struggle for liberation. Now, what does that mean to you? If you see yourself as an ally of ours, what does that mean to you? And, the whole question of African liberation is one where, for us, it involves the emancipation of all of humanity. It's not just about us. We think very much about the fact that if we did everything to ourselves to make ourselves feel good, but that hurts other people, what does that mean to us? Okay, so it's important for us to hear you in terms of what you see as our liberation and what that means to you as well. Is that clear? Okay.
Thank you. So we all come from different places in our group, and it's like different levels of confidence with understanding, but we were all kind of pretty much acknowledging that we still have things that we're confused about and that we're trying to learn. And we were talking about just how important we found that learning is, and that the kind of recognizing when it's important to just sit back and listen and not try and be like, oh, I can help, oh, I'm so confident and I feel so guilty, so let me do something and I know what to do and I know what's good for you kind of thing is just incredibly destructive. And having that thing where your guilt fuels your action can be toxic, and it can be your ears shut off and you stop listening to people trying to tell you about what they need and what their experiences are, and you just start kind of taking action in all directions, which isn't super helpful. We were kind of talking about what can we do instead of that. So yeah, listening is really important, and knowing when to support and kind of stand in solidarity, and just kind of do what's needed and do what people ask of you rather than do what you think they need, is really important. I'm going to try and read some things as well. Just about learning about your privilege, learning about your history, learning about what you're grounded in is really important, because if you don't know the history of your communities and the history of your people, then how are you going to possibly move forward from that and unlearn the things that have been put into your head? And passing the mic, also not speaking for communities and not speaking for other people is really important. So knowing when to step back from that. Awareness of your privilege, acknowledging your confusion and sitting in it and moving forward from it, rather than just being like, I'm so confused so I can't do anything. Be like, I'm confused so I'm going to learn, is really important. Not deciding for other people what they need and not assuming what other people need, but actually asking and working with people. What else have we got? We were sort of talking about the whole idea of charity being destructive as well, and like that thing that's put into our heads of like giving help from a place of like separateness rather than a place of like your liberation is bound up with mine, kind of being like, oh, I should help you because you're not privileged and I'm privileged and I have to help and stuff is destructive. What else? Sorry, what was the second question? Because we kind of merged them in.
So what does Pan-Afrikan Liberation on the continent and Diaspora of African Allies?
So we kind of moved into that, and we had a couple of differing opinions on what Pan-Afrikan liberation means to allies, and we were sort of talking. There's this quote by Lilla Watson that we said at the end, which is, if you have come here to help me, it's kind of a paraphrase, sorry. If you come here to help me, then you're wasting your time. But if your liberation is bound up with mine, then we can work together. And that whole idea of recognizing how different liberations intersect and how we can kind of be part of a collective struggle without having like a kind of external savior complex, but be like, no, this world would be better for all of us if we all work together to change it, and we need to definitely recognize our privileges in that space and recognize when to step back and when to learn and things, but also recognize that we have a small part of that struggle as well that we need to also dismantle, and we can all collectively liberate ourselves together. So that was cool. I'm not very good at reading this writing. Do I need to speak? Thank you. There's quite a few points. So we were talking about... Oh, do you know when it starts on the other question? Thank you. I don't know why I have a pen. We started talking about using your white privilege like within protests. Someone was talking about their experience of being asked to kind of put themselves in the way of the police so that other people wouldn't be arrested, and he was talking about the person who asked him to do it said something like a black arrest is not a white arrest, and trying to get him to recognize that him putting himself in that position is kind of better than than allowing another person to be arrested who would be brutalized by the police. And then we were moving into that place of, but that attitude can also be problematic. Like, we need to understand that you don't always need to kind of like put yourself in that position. I don't know. I'm not quite sure where that went afterwards. Recognizing your privileges within your communities and within your groups is really important. There's a thing here that says acknowledging how a system that disadvantages one person disadvantages everyone, disadvantages the whole community, and also we can recognize And then we just ended with talking about how our liberation's bound up together and how we need to recognise that it's not just other people's struggle. We should also connect our own struggles with it and stand in solidarity, because active solidarity means recognising the global struggle, not just singular struggles. So I think is that everything? Is that good? Sorry if it was very waffly, but thank you.
Okay, I'm Grace. This is Stu. So yeah, we agree with a lot of what Freya's group was saying. Some additions to this is we were thinking that if we form allies, then we can kind of counteract the divide caused by institutions like the media, because that's ultimately what they want us to do. They want us to turn in on each other. And we also think that the niceness of being in solidarity with other groups is you also learn how to organise within your own group and how to give trainings, for example, that are a lot kind of wider and are more open to all sorts of different people. And we were also talking about how it's kind of all our issue, and the media has such a big impact on how we see everybody else, that being literally physically in each other's presence like today allows you to kind of have your own impressions of everybody, and form really strong links of trust between each other. Also, just forming a habit of listening to other organisers and listening to people and taking actions from others when you're usually in, especially coming from white privilege, feeling like you can lead a group. Instead, you're actually supposed to be listening to them. Also, knowing that ecocide is equal to genocide, it has the same importance, and so applying that to everything you do. Action-wise, have you got anything else? Do you want to come and join?
I
Sorry, I've kind of run out of things.
All right. Hi everyone, I'm Stu. One of the things we talked about is about the question of what would it mean for African heritage people to have non-African allies come in support of Pan-Afrikan liberation. And the meaning there that we saw, talked about a bit, was about the feeling that of not being quite so alone in this liberation movement. That for centuries there has been African liberation struggles, and for a lot of that time, especially white people have not shown up, and have, of course, been the aggressors. And there have been, throughout these centuries, there have been white people and people of other ethnicities or heritages that have been in solidarity. But that sense of we're not alone being really important, and that coming with a sense of relief and gratitude. And we also talked about the question of, so why is there different spaces? That there is a space here and there's a space for people, which is for everyone, including non-African heritage allies, and there's a space for African heritage people. And why the separate spaces? Should we not be in that space with them? And then realizing that that was centralizing non-African people on a day which is about centralizing African people and heritage and struggle. And actually how that reduces the sense of safety that can be in that space. I know for myself, I only became aware of what it meant, or some of that I was white, and that shaped the way that I saw the world in probably my late 20s, my 30s. It's an ongoing process. I only really learned about the specifics, or some of the specifics about anti-black and anti-African racism in the last 3 years. That makes me a toddler in terms of my awareness around the dynamics of this. Whereas somebody of African heritage is with that information from the day they're born and can articulate that often by the age of 3 or 4. And so by the time they're my age of coming up to 40, they'll have got 35, 40 years of like understanding how the dark hue of their skin like causes and navigating the world that's different. And then how we, or myself as a white person, like come in with this toddler attitude and say, I want to be in that space too. And that's really dangerous because I don't have the awareness, and I can do things really like with the best intention, but the impact is to centralize myself or to show up with a sense of like fragility, or my own feelings become the like right in the center again, or something like that. And so the importance of us being in separate spaces so that we can do the work of talking about these issues and being together to really get to grapple with, this is centuries old patterning of thought, of behavior, of emotional sort of effects on us. And we're not going to solve this quickly. You know, we can grow up by doing the work and learning, increasing our individual awareness about this stuff. But it's going to take a long time for us to really be able to come together as a family. And yet that is the work to do. That is about Pan-African liberation.
Okay, so what we were talking about was, on the first question, was kind of recognising, that we're kind of linked up in a global system and a global struggle, and that there's a kind of particular position that we're in the global north in terms of being closer to the kind of the centres of kind of...
Raise your voice.
Sorry. Being closer here to the centres of kind of colonial and neo-colonial and capitalist power, and that we have a kind of a privilege there in the sense that kind of what we say has a greater weight and maybe listened to more, but then also the importance of kind of recognising the power in that space and how we need to kind of hand over and not kind of just take that that weight that we have in when we kind of and always like in that wanting to kind of challenge the power and not just saying, oh hey, listen to us because we're here. And then we were also talking about kind of changing the narrative and the focus around, for example, we were kind of speaking around Shell and kind of highlighting how the climate ecological crisis is not just like a carbon issue, and that's a lot of the narratives that exist in the kind of climate space in the global north, and kind of linking that to these kind of power systems and how challenging kind of governments and organisations that are based here is the kind of work of healing and reparations, and also holding to account for like the huge amount of responsibility that comes from the past. And then we were also kind of talking about this, Chaos was sharing about this idea of kind of allyship as opposed to being an accomplice, and kind of saying that we're not wanting to be allies kind of in the struggle, but accomplices in the struggle against white supremacy and colonialism, and that kind of talking about or aiming for reform or kind of nice conversations is not the point, and we're kind of we need to start betraying and really kind of acknowledging how we're complicit and challenging and betraying that, and that there's not time for petitions now, and it's a kind of about coming together and really starting to like flip the table of power and break it down. That's what I said.
I'm going to talk about the second question. So what does Pan-Afrikan Liberation, Continental and Diaspora mean to allies? We talked about the demands for healing and repair being central to the reparations movement, but understanding that cannot happen within the current power structures, so they need to be abolished, and sort of like the understanding that reparations like necessitates that the system breaks down. Also that there's it's a difficult one with guilt and individualizing the struggle, because that takes energy away from actually working at the system level of considering the alternatives that come from the communities of struggle and that come from the communities of reparatory justice about a fairer and more, a world that has repair at its core. And sort of understanding that people in the global south know that the centers of destruction are in London, are in Amsterdam, are in New York. Then someone said that's why, sort of like, what does it mean for us to be in the reparationist movement and to be in allyship with the reparationist movement has a lot to do with learning and inspiration. Showing us that people have been resisting and sort of learning from the alternative ways of being and the alternative ways of knowing that create alternative ways of living together with the earth and with each other. And someone said that reparations is a practical way of redistributing, and it's a practical way to start building a future sort of thing. So it's both. It's bringing the past and the future into the present in very practical ways that bring a holistic sense of relationship with each other and a holistic sense of relationship with the earth. And and the idea that reparations is a method to reach global liberations. And it is a revolutionary demand that challenges the idea that to have a system based on death is sort of okay and we just roll around our days and go with it. And someone also talked about coming into interconnection and rebuilding interconnection, and that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Interesting points, but I also have some challenging comments. It struck me, particularly a point that Stu made, the brilliant things he said, but he said something that, from my perspective, needs correction. The idea that, for example, African people have been in their liberation struggle very much on their own without many people from communities racialized as white being on their side is actually not historically correct. And one of the things that shocks me is how people in this country and also in Europe know very little about the rebels in their own history, who are not hundreds, not thousands. It's gotten to points where millions of people in this country rebelled against the establishment. The horrors it's been perpetrating against other peoples. And that this is airbrushed out of national consciousness, is amazing. Chattel enslavement was defeated not by Africans standing on their own. It took a mass movement of millions of people from this country, led largely by women, but also with school children who refused to take sugar in their tea, right? Now, how it's difficult when we talk about chattel enslavement of African people. Most people in this country feel, an urge not to discuss because they feel guilty about it. Shocks me, because when you go into the real history of real people, right? And I think almost in every family you find somebody who was part of that abolitionist movement, but has been so airbrushed. Okay? So I think the real challenge is for people people in this country knowing their own true people's history. And if they knew, they would not take the criminals who are portrayed as their great heroes as the ones who represent their national consciousness. I think the ruling class of this country has been very good at getting people not to know their true people's history and to take the history made by the ruling classes, distorted as the country's history. So that is really something that people have to work on. And in terms of building allyship, it is about learning the truth about each other, right? All oppressed people also have traitors in their history. And all oppressor nations at some point have also rebelled en masse. It didn't happen with only chattel enslavement. It also happened. That is why the colonial empire has been dismantled to some extent, because it got to a point where the vast majority of people in this country could not associate with the British Empire as it used to be. So the system, the establishment had to make some adjustments, not only because Africans were rebelling against colonial domination. There were lots of British people who didn't want the empire. How come today empire becomes something that the majority of people in this country glorify? So there's the Order of the British Empire, there is the Commander of the British Empire as awards, right? How did the ruling class come round to something that the majority of people rejected, to now actually developing awards, to give to people today? So I think, for me, these are the key questions that need to be critically, examined. And if we examined those particular experiences from the past, we can apply them to the present, right? Today, there is an attempt by the establishment to criminalize those rising up against ecocide. But the everyday life of people in this country, the life we are compelled to lead, all of us we are compelled to lead, means death, not just for plants and animals, but also for human beings in the majority world. That is the reality. You don't have to take, a gun and shoot somebody. You just have to live the normal way you live in this country, and that contributes to death in other parts of the world. And people refuse to see this because the media does not encourage them to see it that way. Okay? But that is why you have movements of rebellion, and that is why it is correct for Extinction Rebellion to declare a rebellion against that. Because this lie of people living at the expense of the majority of peoples in the world, in this country, in Europe and America, this has to be exposed, right? And I think that this is each generation is confronted by these challenges of looking at how your society is organized and how your everyday life that you take to be normal, right? It actually means death for millions of people elsewhere. Okay, and that is the challenge we face right now. So allyship for me is not about, the nice words are fine. But at the moment, the British government and the British corporations, British academic institutions are actively involved in killing people in Africa, in Asia, in south of Abiyala, right, or the global south, generally. Actively involved in doing it, right? They've recently been trying to push through overseas operations bill. People talk about, the policing bill. But what about the overseas operations bill that those who are saying kill the bill don't want to look at? How does that happen? Now, when your secret service is operating elsewhere, your armed forces operating elsewhere, actually have the license to kill, right? But you're concerned about how the police behave, not how your armed forces actively are behaving and your secret services are actively behaving, colluding in killing those whose only crimes are they want to defend their lands against pollution, they want to defend the power of their communities, they're standing up. Why? Why can't you see this? So allyship has to be very, very concrete. And allyship is being able to stand up to your governments, to your corporations that are doing these things, but stand up in a way where those who are in rebellion against them feel empowered. It's not enough to do the good, feel good things here, go on a protest, sign a petition, and so those things don't really mean anything. But being able to bring into your homes the activists and communities standing up against what your governments are doing, right? What your corporations are doing, being openly, in identification with those folks. That is what allyship for me means, And when you're doing that, people will know that you are on their side, and people will see you differently. As at now, the global South generally doesn't see any different picture of the people of Britain from the government and corporations of Britain. Okay, and that is what needs to change. We need to get to the point where people across the world can see that this is where people in Britain stand as against the crimes of their governments, the crimes of the academic institutions, the crimes of corporations. People in the world have to see that. And that is what allyship should translate concretely into. So when Britain today, right, is behind what the government in Ghana is doing, murdering journalists, right, electoral violence, right, corruption on a grand scale, with Prince Charles leading the charge and being awarded for being part of corruption. But when they talk about corruption in Ghana, they point to Africans. What about the role of those who lead your government, Boris Johnson and the rest, in that corruption? Right? So this is what allyship has to be very, very concrete. And it is in that we will be able to build a unified force of humanity, of the majority of humanity against the few. Because the day they see us standing together across continents, on the side of justice, they know the game is up for them. Today they don't see that, because people still act as if they are confused, and people make all kinds of excuses not to see a clear picture. That if you go across the world, you see the same corporations, the same academics, the same politicians from this part of the world responsible, whether be it Africa, be it Asia, be it South America. You see the same corporations, the same politicians, the same academics, justifying literally murder. Why can't we expose them? Right? So this is really the challenge of being, of building allyship, where we can stand on the side of justice for everybody to see where we stand. And then those who want to commit these crimes know they cannot, because the wrath of all peoples will be turned against them. And until we get to that point, allyship will still be something we are wishing for. The discussion is important, but I think that working concretely, practically at emancipating each other is the challenge. And I want to leave it on this note. That, you see, when Lila Watson talks about, if you want to help me, forget it. I don't need your help. Right? But if you think your liberation is bound up with mine, then let's work together. Let's examine that. Many people walk this world, this part of the world, thinking they are very free. But the murders being committed in Africa, Asia, South America today, that blood is on your hands. When you go watching your football games, that blood is on the football fields. When you go raving, that blood is in these halls you're raving. When you go to your schools, that blood is there. When you go shopping, the blood is splattered on the shopping walls. You don't want to see them, but the blood is there. And pretending that it's not there is lying to yourself. It is enslaving yourself. In lies, you choose to enslave yourself to those who are committing crimes in your name, because they commit these crimes because you say nothing. And your saying nothing is complicity in that crime. Okay? So you have to have a responsibility of saying, I want to free myself from this criminality by those who go around the world acting in my name, committing murders, and refusing to let me know. So if we were to hold people in positions across the world to account for what they do, without blind faith in them, like the court process is coming and people are jumping up and down, let's go and plead with these people to save the world for us. They are the only ones who can do it. Are you hearing yourself? Millions of you are saying a few criminals who will come together in Glasgow are the ones to save the world, and you cannot. When the power is really in your hands. So this is really where we show allyship in terms of let the peoples of the world start talking to each other, start connecting with each other. This is the essence of global citizens assemblies, where people decide that this is how it has to be, and it's endorsed by communities across the world, and that is the will of humanity imposed by each and every one of us. If we had the people power to today occupy the entirety of Brixton Road, that power will be seen by the entire world. That despite what the British government is saying, people choose to do that. And this is the co-liberation that we should be seeking, where we take joint action to impose our will and nobody dares oppose our people's will. That, for me, when we get to that point, allyship will become very, very concrete. Thank you.
If anybody wants to come up, respond, or add any comments, please feel free. It's the space is yours. So yeah, if you want to come up and reflect on anything that you've heard, please feel free to do so.
This is not really a reflection so much as a question.
Oh, no.
So, okay. And I think a lot of people here will have heard, I'm just looking for what it stands for, ISDS. ISDS, the Investor State something. It was in the papers recently where the Italian government is being sued by a British company, Rockhopper, so an extraction company. They wanted to do some fracking in Italy. The Italian state decided to change its policy and not allow this to happen. And so Rockhopper took the Italian government to court under this clause, ISDS, and the Italian government has to pay Rockhopper millions of dollars. In fact, a lot more money than Rockhopper is actually worth as a company at the moment. It's a company based in this country. And it turns out that this ISDS is a clause in all international trade agreements and has been in them going back now 50 years or so. It was put in at a time when a lot of African nations were becoming independent and were telling multinational corporations, thank you very much, but you can leave now. We would like to take charge of the extraction operations. And so ISDS was put in to protect the ownership of oil fields, gas fields, etc., mining operations around the world, so that that property remained in the hands of international corporations which are not actually answerable to any nation state. And you are going to hear more and more about this, because as it becomes apparent that there's trillions of dollars invested in what now are, the assets are totally going to be useless in a few years' time. People know that they won't be able to use them, hopefully. Stranded assets, that's it. Then the other option for these multinationals would be to say, okay, then if you shut down our investment, if you shut down our extractions, we will take you to court under this and it will be upheld. Why will it be upheld? It will be upheld because the court is not the United Nations. The court is a tiny group of international lawyers and specialists in intercorporate law, nothing to do with any democracy anywhere on this planet. And these law firms operate in London and in New York mainly. And it is in these places and in these firms that relations between corporations and the rest of the people on this planet are written. So they are telling us what our relationship is to the planet, who owns what and who has to pay what. So just to get into the idea of what it is we are facing, one battlefield is certainly going to be the battlefield in London in terms of international legislation of trade agreements, and how that's going to be. I mean, it's going to be a global battle, but we need to make it very loud in this country.
Hello, my name is Andy. I'm very much in continuation and in support of what Kofi said, and largely what the brother just said just now. With this Maracana Solidarity Collective, and the hypocrisy of the British establishment really does know no bounds. I mean, they keep on going on, especially Johnson now, about how we're leading the world in battling climate change in particular. British corporations are historically the worst criminals on the planet. If you look at the big mining and the big oil corporations, they're responsible for 7 times more carbon emissions outside Britain than the whole of Britain produces. And that's just an indicator of how imperial our country is. And it's through these corporations. The corporation we're talking about here is called Lonmin, London Mining. It's a descendant of Lonrho, the London Rhodesia Company, set up, named after, 2 countries are named after him, Cecil Rhodes. And this legacy of Rhodes is not only the statue in Oxford, the legacy is real. The legacy is structural, the legacy is in the banks, and in particular the very privileged position of the big mining and the big oil companies. And I don't entirely agree that they're not nationally based. They are nationally based. Actually, they're in London. They're City of London based, and they're here defended by the British state and supported by British banks. And they use London as a platform for like a global apartheid operation all around the world. And so it's just to say, I'm sure you know this, but just to remind you that on the 16th of August now, 9 years ago, the ANC government in South Africa collaborated with London Mining, and at the urging of this corporation, they got the police to break a strike. The workers were striking for a pay rise which would have left them with maybe £100 a month. That's what they were fighting for. And the police violence broke the strike, or tried to break the strike. It actually didn't succeed. But you may remember 16th of August 2012, Maracana Massacre. 34 miners were shot down that day. Another 3 were killed before. And every year, here in London, we have a campaign and a commemoration for the Maracana miners. And this will be on the 16th of August. The date does not change, and actually the place does not change. We have the celebration of their lives and remembering of their struggle outside the South African Embassy. So this will be at 4:30 on, it's Monday, happens this year, Monday the 16th of August. It is just one thing, it's not on its own a movement, but it is a very important thing, right? The culpability of the British establishment could not be clearer, and also I have to say the cooperation of the neo-colonial government in South Africa could not be clearer as well. They are co-responsible for this massacre, and so we are continuing to campaign and support the memory of the miners. It's still a hellhole in Maracana. The widows and the women in general, the Maracana in particular, still living in abject poverty. The workers are working very hard for very little money still, and so the struggle continues. And so it's an invitation to join us on the 16th of August. There's this thing here. If you see anybody with one of these, you can do it on your phone, and you go to our Facebook page and so on. And please do come and have a look at the exhibition if you have time, right? And we very much agree with the spirit of today. We're very much in favour of international dialogue. The same corporations who did this in South Africa are doing it all over the world. And they're destroying communities and environments all over the world. So it is truly a global struggle. But it does all, not all, but a lot of it does funnel back to here, because the capital markets and the British state supports these corporations 100%. So we have to give them 100% opposition. Thank you.
I think just in terms of kind of balancing out the inequality that's been caused and that's so deeply rooted in like colonialism and the way that like the Western world and especially the UK has kind of like plundered and exploited the like Africa and other continents as well. I feel like it's left people from like what some people term like the global majority, like people from that group being like obviously massively disadvantaged against like white people essentially. So to be like, and I think a lot of people don't recognise that. I feel like people sort of think that it's just like the natural order of things that this inequality exists, but yeah, it needs to be addressed and kind of like balanced out again. So I feel like that's why, and until that happens, like there's never going to be justice for the people who were affected by colonialism and slavery and all of that stuff. So it's, yeah, I think it's crucial. And, yeah.
As a person looking at it, all the people who feel like you're mixed privilege.
Yeah.
Please tell me, how did that feel?
Well, my family's from like, some of my family's from Dominica in the Caribbean, so I don't actually have like strong connections to like Africa per se, but obviously my ancestors like descended from Africa originally. But I think, yeah, I don't know, I think in recent years I've kind of become more and more in touch with like my roots, because I'm from Brighton originally, so it's quite a white place. I grew up around a lot of white people, but like now I've moved to London, and it's been nice to be able to like sort of get more involved with the black community and feel like and yeah, kind of like think about where my family, like, or half of my family came from. but yeah, like obviously it's it can be a tricky thing to navigate sometimes, being like you know, like having racism exists within my own family on my white side, so it's kind of a weird thing, but I feel like it's a privilege at the same time. So yeah.
Lastly, what does reparations mean to you?
I think it means justice, and it's not the end of the journey, but it's the start of getting to a world where like people's humanity is recognised, and where, you know, people can be liberated. So yeah.
I'm here just to kind of to stand with my fellow African people and demand like justice for centuries and centuries of colonization, slavery, and just the disenfranchisement of black people in this world. This day is really important to me. I only heard about it recently, but I mean, I knew I had to come. I'm from Dublin, where there isn't such a like strong, close-knit black community, but I love seeing this, and I'd love to perhaps bring something to see something like this happen in Ireland as well. Reparations means justice. It means giving back to the black community. For centuries, Africa has just been something for Europe, for white people to extract from, and it's time for them to finally empower us to bring Africa and to bring our people back to the greatness that they once had, that was taken from them so brutally and violently. So it's about getting what we deserve, what's been taken from us for so long.
Well, reparations, I'm not an expert on it, but I understand it's going back to when a lot of people from Africa were used as slaves, and it's to try and get some recompense. And I believe, I could be wrong, that if Jeremy Corbyn had got in, he would have had that one of the things that he wanted to do. I really believe that.
I just feel like this is the first time actually that I'm coming to this event. So I also want to educate myself a bit more about this as well, but I do understand what reparations mean, and I know it's something that is a long time coming. That's something that is owed to us.
Yeah, definitely justice, fairness as well, equality, just basic, that's what it means to me, educating people, that's what it means to me.
So it's a process whereby European governments, Britain in particular, start repairing the damage that they caused over 400 years of slavery and colonialism, and since then neocolonialism that has impacted black people in particular. So our labour was used to enrich this country, and we've never been paid for it. Like our cultures suffer now because of the destruction that was wrought on them. And there's a program that the Caribbean countries have put in place in CARICOM, a 10-point reparations plan that we're asking for them to start putting in place to repair that damage.
Well, you are, I guess.
So it's important as a means, but to get people together to bring the issue as a more prominent one. Also to see black people coming together, or actually a multiracial group of people coming together, to show this was a priority for us. On Emancipation Day as well, which is the day that the slaves were granted emancipation in 1838. So it's really important for us to remember that, but also push for the next step, which is paying that debt that's owed to us as the descendants of those slaves.
It's really, really important. As a person born and bred in Kenya, and having experienced and perhaps seen the connections between what happened, the harms, the historical harms to where we are right now, it's really important for me, and to see the connection of people, African descent to the motherland, and connecting everything together. So it's really important, but I see obviously I understand reparations is not a paycheck, it's part of the repair, it's part of reconnection back to the land, reconnection back to our people, and also repairing and avoiding the repetitions, and that's what for me feels really important, for us to acknowledge all of that stuff.
Why?